And I'm here. This is Janice. I'm driving in, so I just have the big J on my name, but I'm here too.
Hi, Janice. Good morning. Thank you. Drive carefully.
We are live.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sage Turner, Chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee. I'd like to welcome you to our May 21st meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually, and for those of you out there with us today, good morning and welcome. To help our audience follow along, I'll be stating each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. To do so, you call 855-925-2801 and use meeting code 9791. For today's meeting, we also have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To do so, you use the same number. It's 855-925-2801 and meeting code 9791. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At that point, you will need to push *3. That's *3 to enter the speaker queue. Okay, I'm going to go through and introduce all committee members and staff that are participating today. Folks, if you could unmute yourself and say a quick hello when I call your name. Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Shanika.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Rachel Wood.
Good morning.
Assistant City Attorney Janice Ashley.
Good morning.
Community Economic Development Director Nikki Reed.
Good morning.
Affordable Housing Officer Sasha Brzezinski.
Good morning.
We also have Enterprise Community Partners Jarrah Smith with us.
Good morning.
And Dennis, I don't want to mistake your title, and I don't have it printed here, but we have Dennis, Affordable Housing Specialist. Sorry, I don't know your actual title.
All of that, but it's actually Community Development Division Manager.
Community Development Division Manager. Thank you. Apologies for not having the script ready. Okay, thank you everyone for being here today. We have a couple things on the agenda, and first up is the usual approval of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review, and may I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, because we're virtual, we always do a roll call vote. So Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Okay. On the agenda, we have one more large item today. That's number 2 on the agenda, Affordable Housing Plan Update. I think Sasha is going to do a little intro and get us started and pass it to Jarrah. So go ahead. Thank you.
Chair Turner, thank you so much. Yes, so the Affordable Housing Division this year is working on an affordable housing plan, along with community development and our whole department. And we're getting close to the end here in this project. We are starting to review drafts and look at pieces of it, and we're also looking at an implementation roadmap. And we wanted to take an opportunity, since we have some time with you all and there was nothing else on the agenda, so we're kind of taking advantage of that. We really wanted to have some in-depth conversation with you all about 2 issues that perhaps are the thorniest issues that we've been dealing with, over the last few years. And that's the Land Use Incentive Grant Program and the Down Payment Assistance Program. I think our consultant has a lot of thoughts. They've looked at our data and also the larger picture data of what's happening in Asheville. But we wanted to make sure that we understand where council members are, at least especially this committee, are on these issues. So Jarrah Smith with Enterprise Community Partners is here with us today, and I will turn it over to Jarrah.
Thank you, Sasha. Again, my name is Jarrah Smith. I'm the Program Director for Equitable Housing Solutions at Enterprise Community Partners. I'm the project manager on the consultant side who's had the pleasure of working with the city on developing its next affordable housing plan. I'm very happy to be here with you all today, and thank you for inviting me. Next slide, please. So today's key takeaways, our objectives are to focus our discussion on, as Sasha said, the Land Use Incentive Grant Program and the Down Payment Assistance Program. We want to revisit the goals of those policies in particular, and discuss the merits and trade-offs of various LUIGE or down payment assistance program policy scenarios. And if we have time, discuss any other catch-all missing strategies, or what do you want to make sure to see in the plan when it comes back to you in about a month. I want to make one quick caveat here, in that I want to make sure that today's discussion is not posed in a way of either or land use incentive grant or down payment assistance. They're two very different programs that have served, one serves renters, one serves homeowners, one works primarily with market rate developers, one perhaps more with nonprofit developers. So I know that we're focusing on these today, but to Sasha's point, these are the two topics that maybe came up the most, or the two mechanisms that came up the most during our engagement and our research. And so we want to get your feedback on where we're going in terms of recommendations for both of these. But I just want to really emphasize that I'm not trying to pose this as a either or discussion. Additionally, we found that LUIGE, which has been in place since 2010, has helped to fund 22% of all city subsidized rentals since the year 2000, making it the second most effective tool at producing affordable rental options by volume. However, evaluations, both Thrive's and our own, have indicated that the policy could be redesigned to produce more equitable outcomes and address deeper affordability. I know you're all familiar with Thrive's assessment from about a year or so ago. What we did is we essentially picked up where they left off in many ways. They did a lot of the data crunching for us, which was great. But we have had some additional data that we were able to look at. We also did a lot of qualitative analysis regarding LUIGE and down payment assistance through community engagement, focus groups with all the players involved. And we also looked at LUIGE and down payment assistance in the broader context of all of the city's tools, all of the city's housing needs, and we came up with some recommendations for how to proceed with both of those. So I want to thank my partners at the Thrive Partnership for really teeing us off really well going into this conversation. So I also want to say that there has been some strong desire among residents for a down payment assistance program, and there appears to be the political will and interest for the city to support homeownership in additional ways. And I want to emphasize that I will be returning on June 25th to discuss the affordable housing plan more holistically, discussing specific strategies that the city can take to bring the plan strategies to fruition. Whereas today, of course, we're just focusing on LUIGE and down payment assistance. Next slide, please. So a very quick update on where we are in the process. As Sasha mentioned, we are nearing the end where we have been. We've done extensive analysis on housing and demographic data and developed a community profile. We have done extensive community engagement as well. I've traveled to Asheville 3 times, and we've done online and in-person surveys. We've also reviewed previous initiatives that conducted community engagement so that we're not we're cognizant of engagement fatigue. So we're taking the notes and observations of other aligned organizations and incorporating that into our findings as well. What we're doing now is we are working on the implementation roadmap. We're having implementation roadmap work sessions with a variety of different stakeholder groups, and we're actually wrapping those up. We hopefully have just about one more left, but more importantly, really, we're working on the plan at this point. We've started to draft it and put some rubber to the road. What we'll be doing next is, again, I'll be returning on the 25th for a work session with the City Council to discuss the affordable housing plan more holistically. Next slide, please. So to set the stage, I felt it was important to look at and introduce all of the city's tools comprehensively. So number one, of course, is LUIGE. It's a tax abatement grant program that was established in 2011 to incentivize market rate developers to include affordable housing in their development projects. There's a housing trust fund, which is a flexible low interest loan provider similar to a community development financial institution, which was established in 2000, and it serves a variety of different needs for low and moderate income residents. There's affordable housing bond, last passed in 2016, which is a debt security issued by the city to support the housing trust fund and other affordable housing programs. There's down payment assistance, which are grants or low interest loans for eligible home buyers. There's currently no city operated down payment assistance program, but the housing trust fund has supported existing DPA programs in the past. There's of course the city owned land as well, which is leveraged to support additional new affordable housing development and opportunities. And there's the fee rebate program, which is a grant program that rebates developers between 50 to 100% of their fees for qualified projects, depending on the affordable makeup of those developments. Next slide, please. Here's a very quick summary of the city subsidized housing over the past 24 years. So there's 2,315 affordable housing units that have been subsidized by the city. Either people are living in them now, or they're in development or in the pipeline. 36% of those subsidies have funded units at 60% AMI or below. That 60% includes income averaging. So in some cases, it reaches below there, but for the purposes of tracking the data, 36% support 60% AMI or below, and 64% have supported 80% AMI affordability. According to the data that we have available, at least 107 affordable housing units are going to expire over the next decade. It could be more. The city is in the process of tracking down the affordability periods for the remaining projects, but we know for certain that at least 107 will be expiring in the next 10 years. Next slide, please. So when we were looking at the city's toolbox, we were thinking, what is missing and how can we align the city's tools with the housing goals of the Affordable Housing Plan? And our analysis found that these particular outcomes and programs could be supported or revised through city tools to help meet today's housing needs. Number one, more options for 50 to 60% area median income renters and homeowners. We know that the city has done a great job at producing affordable housing units from 60 to 80% AMI, but we know for a variety of reasons that there is a strong need to address deeper affordability of 60% below, 50% or below. Additionally, there's been a strong interest in extending affordability periods. Typically, especially for LaWeege, projects are about 20 years of affordability, but we want to start thinking about how do we support long-term affordability of 30 years plus. There's also been a strong desire to see a more robust home repair program for eligible homeowners and landlords so that homeowners can perhaps age in place and not be displaced, and so that landlords can make needed repairs for their tenants. We've also just found that there's a need for some kind of affordable housing acquisition fund. Given how hot Asheville's market is, it can be really difficult for nonprofits or the city to compete with speculative investors or out-of-state investors or whatever the case may be. And so creating some kind of fund that would allow city and affordable housing aligned organizations to move quickly to purchase property would be a really important tool for the city to have. We also have heard discussions about a funders collaborative. How can we bring all the various entities that have financial resources together and leverage those resources and make sure that our goals are aligned so that we're not wasting any of our time, money, or resources. Strategic land banking, how can the city be more thoughtful about acquiring properties that could be used to support affordable housing? And then of course, a down payment assistance program, which we'll be discussing later, or some other form of home buyer assistance. And then an emergency rental assistance program or some kind of housing stability fund for renters. Next slide, please. So these are the goals that we heard, and I want to just quickly check and see if they align with your goals for the city's tools. And in particular, I have these two questions at the bottom as well. But we've heard that, of course, we want the city's tools to produce racially equitable outcomes. Again, deeper and longer affordability, supporting first-time home buyers and existing home ownership, supporting housing stability for renters, those being kind of the overarching buckets that we've heard. But we also want to understand, are these tools trying to meet more specific needs, or do we want to try and meet broader needs of the city? Do we want to prioritize volume of affordable options, or do we want the tools to be more tailored to perhaps meet deeper or longer subsidies, which might result in less volume overall? So I just want to take a quick break right here and just reflect these back to you. Do you feel like these goals are in alignment with your vision for the city tools? Is there anything missing? And if you have any thoughts on the specific need versus broader need, or volume versus tailored, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Councilwoman, any questions or thoughts to share?
When you were discussing the home repairs to keep homeowners in their homes, I recall I was working for an organization, and at times we would have a difficult time finding folks who will qualify for the programs because of home values. Is what you're suggesting taking into account the home value, just the income?
Or are you asking me?
Asking.
Oh, well, I mean, I suppose that's a very good distinction.
For an example, while you think about that, one of the things that was a barrier was say if there were a carriage house on the property, that property was automatically excluded. And I'm thinking of parts of Kenilworth in particular that used to be South Asheville, which was an historically Black section of town. Sometimes those carriage houses were used so that workers could have a place to stay. And now that causes housing values to go up. More. So you often will have people in $500,000-$600,000 homes with limited incomes who can't qualify for home repairs. Is there a provision for that type of circumstance?
No, I'm glad that you brought up that distinction. So that certainly makes a lot of sense, especially given how rapidly home prices have grown in the city over the last couple decades. So I think an income qualification as opposed to home value makes a lot of sense.
And oddly enough, this might be one of the only times where I would support a higher income limit, because we'd also come across folks, say, two grandparents raising their child, and if they received Medicare for her plus their Social Security, they were this much above limit, while it still may be $45,000 for three people. Time to replace a roof for $20,000. There was just no way they could get it done.
Okay. That's really insightful. Thank you, council member.
Very interesting. Jira, my thought around this last one, greater volume or more tailored options, because this is like a supply and market question, but I kind of wonder if at this point we need so many affordable units across all the AMIs that we do have to tailor options, or specific targeted AMI groups will be left out. I'm saying that because we could create 5,080 AMI units, but it doesn't mean that the whole market will shake out, that some 60 AMI ranges will open up, right? Because we're just so far behind. Do you feel that way?
Absolutely.
Or is that... Okay.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. From my perspective, the reason that I pose these questions is because I certainly have my opinion, but some of these are value questions. There are advantages to having a higher volume of affordable housing units. There are advantages to tailoring programs to meet greater needs. And so I would think that some of the tools can be sharpened to meet some tailored needs, but that is also a question for the city to answer in terms of how do they want to allocate the resources. But that's my feeling on it.
And that branches out into workforce too for me, because we do keep creating this gap where we're producing these 80 AMI units or lower, but we have folks in the 80 to 120 that are just, they can't afford their rent either, and there isn't anything available lower. So we've been kind of excluding them. Our programs used to go that high. So I think I'd be curious to see where we land on this, if targeting very specific includes both deeper, but also some workforce. I don't know how we do it all, frankly. Go ahead.
We've largely been, sorry, go ahead.
Interestingly, I've noticed in instances where we've included workforce housing and lower AMIs, the people who would qualify for the workforce housing aren't seeking to rent in those locations. I can think of locations right now, both one literally in downtown and the other at the edge of downtown, where there are those units available. I think folks in that income bracket don't believe affordable housing is for them.
Right.
The way we think of when we think of different AMIs.
Yes.
Right. That's interesting. And maybe there's a targeted approach, but I do recall these two apartment complexes having that issue.
Very enlightening.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Just in the sake of time, are there any other thoughts on this slide, or shall we move on to our discussion about Luigi? Move on. Okay. Thank you, Sasha. Next slide, please. Okay. The Land Use Incentive Grant Program. Next slide, please. So a quick summary of production to date for Luigi. It's helped, as I said, produce 22% of city subsidized rentals over the last 24 years. It's produced 515 affordable rental homes ranging from 60 to 80% AMI. Those, again, are either built or approved or being constructed. 175 of them have been at the 60% AMI level or below because of the income averaging, and 340 units have been at the 80% AMI. That's also inclusive of 96 voucher set-aside units. One thing that we observed is that Luigi rarely produces homes that are affordable to the 50% AMI level or below without income averaging. And of course, it's really important to note that the median income for Black households in Asheville is roughly 50% AMI, indicating that Luigi may not be producing equitable opportunities for rental home ownerships, or excuse me, for rental homes. I also want to note, though, that 36% is the average share of units that are affordable within these developments, which points to Luigi serving as a effective mixed income tool. And maybe that's a different way to look at it. Next, there's a 22-year average of affordability period between all the Luigi projects. They range from 10 to 50, but it averages 22. Again, we're looking at maybe 30 years or more. Luigi is also usually used on its own. It's rarely paired with another tool, which at least to me indicates that it's the most attractive program for market rate developers. And we also found that the average subsidy per unit over the lifetime of this grant is $45,122. Go ahead, Jen.
Just real quick, when at the top bullet point includes 96 voucher set aside units, for transparency, should we have a little parentheses there that says those are targeting 30 to 50 AMI? This
Sure.
reads, and that's something we try and convey when we're messaging and approving these projects, that when we do the set asides, that they are achieving the lower AMI. So it reads like we're not hitting any deeper AMIs, but we are.
Right. That's a great point. Thank you. Next slide, please. So these are the three scenarios that we were considering for a Luigi policy. Now, I know that some of these are, or that this may seem obvious, but I want to make sure to take us through all the options because I've heard passionate arguments for all of these. So number one, I know that the city currently has a moratorium on Luigi applications, so the city could repeal it outright with no replacement in mind. The advantages to that being that it eliminates the concerns around potentially racially inequitable outcomes, and those tax dollars could be used to support additional affordable housing programs. The disadvantage of that is that it eliminates one of the city's most productive tools for incentivizing affordable housing production, especially as it relates to involving market rate developers. Alternatively, could leave Luigi as it is right now. The advantages being that it maintains a familiar program that the city, developers, funders all know and understand, and it will continue to add affordable housing stock to the city's rental housing stock, which, the city absolutely needs a greater supply of affordable housing. The disadvantages, though, is that it maintains a program that I don't think anybody believes is truly perfect at the moment, and it ignores concerns from the city and residents about the potentially inequitable outcomes that it's producing. So then the third scenario, which I have some recommendations for on the next slide, is reshaping the existing policy. So the advantages of that are that it realigns policy goals with contemporary city goals and housing trends, and there's potentially opportunities for additional partnerships beyond just market rate developers. The disadvantage, though, is this will take some additional staff time. It'll take workshopping, focus groups with developers, residents, and the city to make sure that this policy really fits the market and also is reaching the goals of the city for affordable housing. So I'm going to go into those recommendations on the next slide, and then we can talk about these three scenarios. The next slide, please. So we broke our recommendations into two different categories: goals and eligible uses, and administration. And I don't want one to be any more important than the other. But so as far as goals are concerned, as I said, we've heard over and over that we need to support deeper affordability, 50% or below, and longer affordability periods. So the scoring system could be restructured to have more points for those particular AMI brackets or those affordability periods, or perhaps it only has those specific categories in mind, and it can't be used for 60 to 80% AMI units, for example. We could also institute a tiered scoring system where perhaps 5%, the developers earn a 5% tax credit when 20% of the units are affordable to 60% or below AMI, or they can accrue additional 5% tax abatement when affordability periods are beyond 20 years. The advantage of this is that it simplifies the process administratively. The disadvantage is that it takes away some of the flexibility that market rate developers have when they're applying for a the Luigi program. We also feel that it'd be important to expand the scope to include potentially acquisition of affordable properties, preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing, and incorporating or developing a similar policy for mobile home communities. We spent a lot of time speaking with Poder Emma, and that was one of their strongest recommendations and asks is that we figure out a way to incorporate mobile home communities as a part of a tax abatement program. Additionally, we could look at geographically targeted Luigi areas. If we want to make sure that these programs are truly focusing on areas like corridors or downtown where there's the most job opportunities, accessibility to services, et cetera, we could limit the actual geographic scope of Luigi or target it in specific areas where we feel like that kind of mixed income housing might be most advantageous. On the administrative side, one of the most important things is we feel it's important to require pro formas as a part of the application process. If Luigi is truly meant to be a but-for tool, then the city needs to understand what the but-for is. This is already common practice for the Housing Trust Fund, and so I see no reason why it shouldn't additionally be a part of the Luigi application as well. The city could also set budgetary limits, whether that's an annual cap on Luigi or a per unit cap. So the advantages of that is that it kind of slows down the city's allocation of these tax abatements, can be more judicious about which projects it's supporting by having this cap, knowing that there's perhaps an annual limit to how much can be provided over the course of a year. The disadvantage being that potentially once that cap has been hit, there may be development projects that would otherwise qualify for Luigi or support affordable housing that will be built regardless and won't include affordable housing. We could also raise the buy right thresholds for affordable housing projects, specifically just affordable housing projects. I know that this one is a little bit more of a long shot, but developing a city and a county Luigi partnership, maybe that's something more in the long term that could be established. But as we know, Luigi currently only applies to city taxes, but one way to make it even more appealing to market rate developers and a way to make it easier to reach those deeper subsidies and those longer affordability periods is by joining in partnership with the county so that it can abate their property taxes as well. We also recommend considering addressing the voucher double dipping, as in essentially subsidizing developers to accept what is essentially a market rate rent already. And maybe most importantly, and perhaps this should have been the first bullet, frankly, is adding additional staff and staff capacity for better tracking and enforcement. Even if the policy is left completely unchanged, there just needs to be more city staff to be able to track down and enforce the Luigi policy. This is not for a lack of organization or drive. It is just simply a matter of staff capacity. And the city is looking to invest in affordable housing. One of the best bangs for their buck is going to be another staff member to help support affordable housing initiatives. And then last, something to consider is a right of first refusal, as in when a property's affordability period expires or a property that was supported by the city is going up for sale, the city or a nonprofit agency could have the first right to make an offer for that particular property. This would likely require some enabling legislation at the state level, but something that's worth considering as well. And yes, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these recommendations, so please go ahead.
I'm just really curious what you meant by enforcement and that for better tracking and enforcement. Are we having a problem or you just mean we could use more manpower?
More manpower. Yeah, I wouldn't say yes. Yeah, yes, I should say. Yeah. As we all know, it's a complicated process. It's a long process. It takes a lot of time, especially when the proposals need to go back to the drawing board or whatever the case may be. And it just takes up a lot of time. And I'm not saying that it's not a good tool by any means, but additional capacity is needed in order to make sure that we're tracking these appropriately, that we know the affordability length. And especially if we want to start requiring pro formas, that'll be another skill set that would be really advantageous to have on staff.
Okay, and I'm realizing, recently we had a lot of back and forth around a particular wage, so I get what you're saying. Lots and lots of time involved in the contract process. Okay,
Yeah.
I love the right of first refusal addition.
Great.
Yeah. Go ahead, Antoinette.
When you say raise the buy right thresholds for affordable housing projects, are we to assume that affordable in this case means 60%, or are we using the usual 80% AMI?
I suppose that's a good question. Well, it depends on what we would want the affordability threshold for Luigi to be. So if we in fact want it to be a tool for 60% or 50% and below, then that's the level that we'd be talking about. But when I'm saying affordable housing, usually I'm referring to 80% or below.
Because I'm wondering how this ties in, since you were able to attend the meeting where we received the Cease the Harm audit.
Yes.
And I don't know if you saw the discussion about the missing middle and the displacement areas. I'm still kind of having a concern about increasing or raising the buy right thresholds for developments that are adjacent to areas primed for displacement. Those AMIs are higher than who's living there, then we've just made it easier. Place.
That's a great point. Then in that case, it would make sense to perhaps tailor this specifically to 60%, 50% or below AMI, or perhaps, if it's combined with the geographically targeted Luigi developments that are close to those areas that are most sensitive to displacement and gentrification, the buy right would either not apply or it would only apply if they have X amount of units at the 50% AMI level, for instance, because you make an absolutely great point that by promoting properties that are above the neighborhood AMI is perhaps facilitating gentrification. So thank you for bringing that up.
Interesting in the minutia there. I like it. This thresholds idea, buy right thresholds, it would be helpful if we have a concurrent process going on with our planning and zoning board. They're looking at, so I guess their conversation, I hope I summarized this well, is that if you are a commercial property or a larger property, the threshold at which you require council approval is 100,000 square feet. But when we come to residential, we get into unit count instead. So our planning and zoning board is talking about two things. Like there has been some interest from council members around getting the unit count higher, say maybe 99, I'm just throwing out a number. But with P&Z looking at it on a square footage level instead of a unit count number, it'd be really helpful for you and your expertise to weigh in on that. If there's a method that is better suited, if we go unit count versus square footage, and they're using some, you might be interested just to nerd out on how they're calculating this and the unit counts and the square footage per apartment and stuff.
That is. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay.
Oh,
you might enjoy it. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I will. Well, and I should say, unfortunately, I'm not P&Z's consultant, so I don't want to tell them what to do. But that's very interesting. My initial thoughts are, square footage. That's easier to calculate.
No need to answer today either. I'm just wondering if you looked out the rest of this planning. If that comes up, I'd love to have insight on it. If it's not part of your existing planning, it's okay. It's just something they're going to bring to us eventually.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sasha.
Well, if we're moving on, that's okay. But I just wanted to say, I attended a P&Z work session with planning staff, and there's a lot of difficulty with the square foot piece in terms of how we track data and how we process things. So there's a lot of technical detail in there that I think planners can address that we probably can't. So
Okay,
we need to consult with them as well. That's all. That's all.
thank you.
Great. Any other questions or thoughts around these, or should we move on to town maintenance systems?
Only last comment is that, so when we talk about budgetary limits, it is interesting. We are gauging, we're doing this Luigi, but I don't always know what that line item of cost per year is, and if we should be capping it, or when we look at bonds, if we should be looking at that as a bond strategy, not just a general fund strategy. So
Right.
more information, the better.
Yeah. Good point. Thank
Any
you.
other, Councilwoman, any other input before we, go ahead, Sasha.
Sorry, I would love to hear any thoughts you all have about income targeting with this program, because I think, and Jared's kind of said it, but just, it's a balance game, right? So we're trying to make this project worthwhile to developers. We saw that in 2019 or so, when the point system changed, all of a sudden it became attractive to developers because it made economic sense for them to take advantage of this program. So we've had all these projects come through. So we wanted to make economic sense for developers, and we want our city goals to be met. So that might mean if we were targeting, 60% 50 or 60% AMI unit income, and lower, it won't be necessarily 20% of the units.
Right.
I mean, there's some kind of math going on here, right? That makes it sense
Right.
that we're all getting a good deal, right? So, and I just would love any comments that you all have about that, if that's something, because I also know that once this plan gets done, we're expected to come up with a policy pretty fast, if we can, that works for a lot of people. And so the more thoughts we can get from you all, the better. So that's all.
Sasha, that's why I brought up my comment earlier around, are we so far behind that just throwing units onto the market at 80 AMI will infiltrate the lower AMIs? And I just don't believe that's the case. So I think targeting is going to be imperative, which means for developers' sake, it may mean that it's 17% of the units or whatever that equals. But maybe what we need to do is get some input or run these scenarios across past projects to see if how they would have turned out. Or, we've been talking more and more about the idea of our old developer forum, where we got everybody together and said, what stopped you in the building codes? What stopped you in the city process? What made it harder for you to get your deal across the finish line? Maybe that's something we could seek input on, because it doesn't work as a policy if no one uses it.
Right.
Well, here's my thought on that. Sometimes, frankly, I would prefer more market rate, because the market decides what's truly affordable. And then so it becomes, are we better able to utilize those tax dollars, fund them into the housing trust fund, and get where we need to be either way? So in my mind, I'm okay with fewer deeply affordable units or regular market rate if it means we have more tax dollars to funnel our approach. Did any of that make sense?
Yeah, and I think we've had this conversation before. And one of the things that came up is that letting developers out of producing them and just doing like an in lieu fee instead? And then do we not have mixed income units popping up instead? That was the only feedback I remember for that, because it's complicated, right? If we want every project to be mixed income, if we let them just send money to a fund and produce all market rate, will we get the best result long term? That's why we have JERA.
Well, my thought is, alternatively, sometimes when we're manipulating the market, we ourselves may be unintentionally, artificially inflating
Absolutely
the market, because your balance sheet is going to come out how you need it to come out. So you're going to make up the reduction in 10 units by increasing the remaining 20.
Absolutely. Yeah. Developers don't seem to take less income. They seem to push it other places on the pro forma.
Really what I'm saying is, let's think of a way that we can get out of the way, allow developers to develop, because this might end up being more for nonprofits. I don't know how it pans out.
And I do just want to interject here really quickly. Shane Phillips, who wrote The Affordable City, was here last week, and not in Asheville. He was in Hendersonville mainly. And I'm seeing if they have a recording of that, and I will share it if we can get it. But there's a couple big points that one is that he has some newer research. He found some newer research that shows that when market rate units come online and then people move into them, it's called the migration chain. I don't know if that's right, but as people rent those units, maybe they move out of a unit that's $200 less. And then the next person moves into that unit. And then, and eventually it does filter down, and it happens faster. Research is showing it happens faster than we thought. We thought maybe it's 5 to 7 years, and it actually could happen much faster than that. So there is also this easing of the squeeze at the lower rate units. And I think also in Enterprise's data, it shows that when we look at the units by income and who's in those units, it's all a mix. So like in the 60% units, there's people at 80% living in them there, and there's people at 30% living in those units, so some people are really cost burdened and some people are not paying as much as they could. So I think, to your point, Councilwoman Mosley, I think you're right on target. Like adding to the supply will help everyone. That's not our only job, obviously. And also the more supply there is, it makes our subsidy. The other point I got from him was, if we don't add supply, our subsidy doesn't go as far and the costs just keep going up. So our subsidy will actually go further if there's more units on the market. And I'll stop there. I'm sorry I'm talking so much.
That's great, Sasha. I know we could talk about Luigi all day, and I would love to keep going.
Well, I would like
to keep talking about this, but please, yes. Anything else before moving on to down payment assistance?
I would just like to get a feel amongst us where we stand on the options from the previous slide. I will go ahead and say that I'm not in support of the status quo, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at number 3. I don't want to repeal it. Status quo has got some problems throughout it. My concern is around capacity for number 3. And I want to make sure staff feel like they can do number 3. But yeah, that's it. Otherwise, that's where I'm at.
Go back to the slide. Yeah, I can go with reshaping the existing policy, but definitely very cognizant of how much staff time is already taken through different processes. And if we have the manpower to pull it off, seems like we do a lot of engagement. And with the audience of folks that we usually engage, they might be tired of the conversation. So I don't know if we already have information that we've already generated from engagement processes that will help us. But yeah, I don't want the status quo.
I think one of the missing elements here is the pro forma, is looking at the map and seeing what will work. And that's really I think the crux of how to reshape existing policy is to either get pro formas from previously approved Luigi projects and evaluate them and play with the numbers to see if we could get deeper or longer affordability, or whatever the case may be. But I think that's kind of the big next step, is to start collecting some pro formas and playing with the numbers to see what can actually work out in the market.
Jarrett, do you think that means like us putting their data into our own essential pro forma? I mean, pro formas can be elusive. If they're being submitted to government, they may have things like 50% contingency in areas and we wouldn't know it. Like, how do we get an even playing field on measuring pro formas? Not to be answered today, but just a thought, because I know we want to move there. Yeah.
That's a fair point. Yeah, something to think about. Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts on Luigi before we move into DPA, y'all? Okay. I feel like we could have like full day work sessions on these topics.
Oh yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jared. Next one.
Great. Thank you. Yes. All right. Down payment assistance. Okay. Next slide, please. So these questions I just want you to think about as I go through these next couple of slides. And I'm asking, what are your goals for the city's role in supporting home ownership and or a DPA program? So is the idea to promote maximizing wealth generation, intergenerational wealth building, or is shared equity an amenable model for home ownership? Are we looking at making sure that there are grants, which maximizes the impact for homeowners, or are we looking at loans, which helps the city recoup the cost and maybe perhaps have a larger impact itself? Do we want to focus on eliminating the racial homeownership gap? Do we want to focus on stabilizing the city workforce? I heard that it's been increasingly difficult for the city to recruit and retain staff because it can be so hard to afford to live here. And then again, do we want to look at the volume? Do the most people helping? Do we want to help the most people, or do we want to help those who are most in need of home ownership opportunities? Next slide, please. So here is some quick math looking at a conventional home buying process based on March 2024 data. So if you were to put 20% down, essentially, on a property, on a median property in March 2024, if you're looking to buy a single family home, the median sales price is $462,500. That, though, I should say, is inclusive of townhomes and condos. If you're looking specifically at single family detached homes, the median sales price was $519,250. If you're looking to put 20% down for that, that means that that's $92,500 for any single family home. Again, it's $103,000 for single family detached. There are 3 products that are available right now for down payment assistance, which could be maximized up to $60,000. This, however, is not accessible to everyone. This would have to be a pretty unique situation. I know that this happens, but it's pretty difficult to find a qualified buyer who can qualify for all 3, find a property that qualifies for all 3, and find a seller who's willing to accept all 3 as well. But in the best case scenario, someone could receive up to $60,000 in down payment assistance from one of these 3 particular organizations. So that means that if you're trying to put 20% down, the gap is $32,500 for a median sales price home. And again, if you're looking at single family detached, that's a gap of $43,850. So again, this is a conventional home purchase math, but we're looking, at folks who are probably not conventional home buyers. So I wanted to put this math in front of you first, but let's go to the next slide. So then I took a look at affordability and availability by household income and race of what's actually on the market. So when we're talking about who we're supporting for down payment assistance programs, we're probably talking more about 5% down and not 20% down. So this column on the left, of course, is average household income for a 2-family household. Then the next column is what the monthly payment would look like, what a 5% down house would be considered affordable to them, which is 25% of their income to account for missing taxes and insurance. And then the final column is what was actually available with a 2+ bedroom in the city of Asheville in actually, I should say just last week. And I included these median household incomes by race on the left as well. And you can see just how small the supply of available, affordable, for sale homes are. So what I'm trying to point out here is that even if the city had a down payment assistance program, you want to make sure that these homes are affordable for the people who are buying them. You could give someone who's making $35,000 a year as a household $500,000 to buy a house, but can they afford to pay the property taxes, the maintenance? Do they need to buy a car to start to commute to work and reach services, whatever the case may be? There's just a severe undersupply of available homes that are affordable to median households in the city of Asheville. Go ahead.
Sure, real quick, these home prices, is this the county data or the city data?
This is
it county?
city
Because
data.
We used to get a regular report monthly from a realtor that would say, here's the number of homes for sale under this threshold. And I haven't seen 32 homes at $275,000 in years. Like we used to measure.
Oh.
monthly.
I see. Okay. No, this is city data, or at least, well, it's what was
32
available on
homes were
Zillow.
for sale for 275,000 range. I mean, we just haven't seen that. Okay, that's, I mean,
Say that
fascinating.
again, Tara. What about, it's according to Zillow. What is Asheville? Is that-
Yes. Yeah. It's according to Zillow.
So somebody could
Good.
market it as Asheville and it might be out of the city limits.
Yeah,
That's also
'cause I
true.
just don't know that that's realistic. If we're going to base, I think it doesn't AHAC still do this, Antoinette? Do they report the realtor?
They haven't been because the threshold number, there are never any houses at
Right.
the original threshold.
I would just hate for us to build a program around that availability that isn't realistic. So we may need to look past Zillow and get actual realtors on board, which they don't mind doing, it seems.
Right. But to your point, Councilwoman, the available stock is probably even less.
It's less.
It's probably,
It's like
yeah,
about
exactly.
400.
It's
Yeah.
even tighter. So again, like a down payment assistance program, you put one out there and there's 3 homes available to the median Latino or Black family. Those folks are all going to be competing also for those three homes. There's just a severe undersupply of affordable for sale opportunities.
Antoinette, you have your hand up. Did you have something else?
Yeah. Do we know if this program is available to a land trust? In my mind, I'm thinking of what can we cobble together to make it happen. What I mean by that is if we did land banking and then turn the property over to the land trust, and then the land trust partnered with the housing authority and the person had a voucher and some escrow, that would be the way to get someone into a home.
What an excellent question, Councilwoman. Could we go to the next slide, please? Because I'm going to get right to that. Right here, I just want to underscore again how unaffordable or how out of reach some of these homes are. When you this is Zillow data. When you look at lower tier homes, those are the ones that sell typically in the 5th to 35th percentile range, and that's probably the folks who we'd be targeting for a down payment assistance program. But as you can see, the median home price is $314,000, and the salary needed to afford that is $93,000, which is way higher than the median income for any 2-person household in the city of Asheville. Next slide, please. So again, these are the 3 scenarios that we can look at for a down payment assistance program. There's no city down payment assistance program, which is the current state of play. There's the advantages being there's no time or resources spent establishing it, and those resources can be used elsewhere. The disadvantages are that the city would need to find alternative ways to support equitable home ownership, and it disregards a strong desire by the community to have a down payment assistance program. Now, Councilwoman Mosley, you pointed out like a partnership down payment assistance. So that is essentially what we're recommending. The advantages being that the city is able to support home ownership without taking on the administrative burden of starting up and underwriting a down payment assistance program. And it can leverage and provide, existing programs and provide more targeted, equitable outcomes. The downside, though, of a partnership, of course, is that there's potentially less control over how those resources are allocated or awarded, and partnerships can be difficult to hatch at times. And then, of course, the last option is a city-run down payment assistance program, which, of course, would give the city the most control over the goals, eligibility, and process. You could fill the gap for down payment assistance as needed, but the disadvantage being that it really takes the most time and resources because setting up a down payment assistance program is a very specific skill set that would be needed for a city staff member. So I would love to hear, so it's Enterprise's feeling that it makes the most sense for the city to have formed some kind of partnership like you were suggesting, Councilwoman Mosley, whether that's through the Community Land Trust, with HACA, with the county's down payment assistance program, or North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. They don't have, I haven't come across a municipal partnership with the state HFA, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen. The point is that I think a partnership allows the city to meet its desire to support homeownership without needing to expend time and resources setting up another program that would also be burdensome to the buyers who need to then apply and qualify for yet another down payment assistance program. So that's my feeling, but I would love to hear from you all what you think about these particular scenarios and options and what a partnership might look like. I should say the last other one, partnership option is you could put out an RFQ like you did in 2016. I know only, I think one applicant came through, so maybe it would be a matter of revising the RFQ or thinking about it a little differently, but also maybe the lending environment is different now. So that's another option for a partnership as well. So what do you all think about these particular options for a DPA program?
I have a question for the committee members. I know we were deep in conversation a couple years ago about a partnership with the agency around DPA, but there were a couple of deal breakers on our end. We didn't proceed with it. So I don't remember what those little barriers were, but I think you were maybe the chair of the Affordable Housing Committee at the time, Sage.
Yeah, I can recall. So with the bonds in 2016, we've set aside $1 million for down payment assistance, went through RFP, had one respondent come back, but the proposal didn't quite meet the criteria. I wasn't on council at the time. I was on the Affordable Housing Committee. What I understood was council at the time wanted to see a model of down payment assistance where the biggest bang for the buck went to the homeowner, and it was not a shared appreciation model. Now, since then, and just recently, last few weeks, we as a body have approved funds going to another agency that is using the shared appreciation model. You probably remember me bringing this up. And what we learned through the process is it can be administrated better, but it needed more staff on it. And that the proceeds from that shared appreciation that went back to the lender would be reused in a new down payment assistance. And that seemed to, I think, satiate council's needs at the time. I don't want to speak for council now, but that's why I keep bringing it up, because I know we want to do this and I don't want us to go through a process again and then hit that wall. So I think what staff are looking for is, are we good with the shared appreciation model? And I know I've come around to it now that we can better administrate it and repurpose the funds that are received. And I also think, to Jared's question, this partnership is best because we don't even have city capacity to administrate our LUID, is what we're saying, like the best we can. So I think if we want to be as hyper productive as our vision and goals are for affordability, we need outsourcing partners across the board. So I love the idea of number two, especially as Councilwoman Mosley said, like getting really hyper creative with all the layers to make sure those in the deepest need are getting mortgages. Does that help, Shanika? I think that was the crux of why it failed last time. Yeah.
And I wasn't on council then either, because I've never been opposed to the shared appreciation model. Frankly, that's the one that I'm most accustomed with. I'm wondering if, what I'm thinking of, how we have the benefits table, and then an applicant has the option of contributing to either the Housing Trust Fund or the Reparations Fund. And in my mind, housing can be a part of reparations. One thing I noticed that we never made clear is how we do that split if the applicant doesn't say which way the applicant wants to go. So I'm wondering if we want to say without any guidance, if it's an automatic 50-50 split. That's one part. And then secondly, I'm wondering if funds from the reparations portion could be used to shore up that $30-something thousand gap that we saw a few slides ago, if we had specific criteria about for whom those funds could be given. But I don't know if it needs to be a nonprofit. Would it go to the nonprofit for the utilization of certain applicants in particular? Janice, is that something that is even legally permissible, do you know? And did that question even make any sense?
Yeah. The question made sense. I got my wheels turning. I'll have to get back to you. I think there are ways to do it. Remember, we always caution, we're fine if we base it on income levels, not so much if we target to certain races, but sometimes there's a way to target so that you can kind of get the two at the same time. It might be locational areas, neighborhoods where down payment assistance is available. So I can think about that.
And also, I wouldn't target it by race. The way I would couch it would be those affected by urban renewal.
Mhm.
And that is really a neighborhood or a location-based qualification and
Okay.
not race-based qualification.
Got that.
And directly related to city action, right? Like the city did X, now the city needs to do Y. Kira, another thought on the down payment assistance. This is one of the concerns that rose up for me, and I may just be flawed in my thinking about it, but this is a couple years ago. So if I understand, when we use partner organizations on the DPA, the loan that they use for down payment is a silent second, meaning that the homeowner is not paying any payments on it. It's not accruing any interest. It's just sitting there. But should they go to sell their house, they have to pay it back plus the shared appreciation. So my concern was that, are we hamstringing homeowners in a situation that could be more loose for their sake? Let's say they find the magical $300,000 house.
Right.
My guess is it needs a new roof in 5 years. It might need a furnace in 2 years, et cetera. So now we've got a family that could barely get by. They got the down payment assistance. They got in. They can barely afford the mortgage, but in a few years they're going to have, let's say, a $10,000 or $20,000 repair, and their hands will be tied on how to address that repair. Now, maybe our robust new home repair system could help, but I mentioned this to the agency that applied, and I encouraged them to come up with some creativity around that. Say if they had to pull out money 5 years in for homeowner repairs, something that would specifically increase the value or maintain the value, that the deployment of that policy could be different. Does that all make sense? Because we don't want to force people to have to stay in a disrepaired home because their only option is to sell.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And to your point, exactly. That's why we're looking at the whole affordable housing ecosystem, because I remember you bringing up that point, and we'd want to make sure that there are resources available for people to make home repair programs. I love that you're taking kind of the next step. You're thinking this all the way through, because one of the things that I wanted to make sure to point out was that, actually, excuse me, I completely have lost my train of thought. What? I'm sorry. It'll come back to me. Yeah.
We were just talking
Other
about
thoughts?
administrating it and how we might get owners stuck in a situation where they couldn't pull out equity to do repairs and things. And maybe a robust repair system helps, but maybe some creativity in the policy. So I hope you.
Oh, this is what I was going to say. Okay, so I would want to make sure that if and when the city sets up a down payment assistance program, whether that's the partnership model or a city-run model, it's imperative that the supply side also be addressed, because you don't want to establish a program that gives folks false hope that they can find that magical home, go through their homeownership readiness program, go through and get all 3 to 4 down payment assistance qualifications, and then there's just nothing on the market for them to be able to actually purchase. So it's really important that, that the city think about how it can, and this is obviously other strategies and elements of the affordable housing plan, but it's just really important that the city think about the supply of affordable for sale property if they choose to go down the road of putting together a down payment assistance program. Because the last thing you want to do is offer false hope and potentially exacerbate feelings of distrust and that some people might have about the effectiveness of these particular programs.
Jared, that makes me think of a question I was holding for the end, but does that suggest maybe we should model such a program on maybe an average sale price of units on market instead of median sales price? Because that median sales price jumps as soon as an $8 million home down the street gets built. And I just wonder if I'm not thumbing up, sorry, I don't know why it's doing that. If we are designing a program around median house price that changes so rapidly, $100,000 a year, then the program could have problems right away. I just wonder if we want to look at average sales price of houses on market or something a little more attainable, just to your point of we don't want to create something that can't be achieved. Just a thought for later.
Great, thank you. I hadn't thought about that. I realize we're past the 11 hour. I was told I have an hour. I am available, but I'm happy to keep speaking. I also don't want to run over whatever procedurally needs to be done after me.
Councilwoman, are you good for another 15 minutes? Everybody good with that? Staff? Okay, let's try and wrap in 15 minutes.
Okay. Well, so really I would love to either continue this conversation about down payment assistance, or honestly, I would love to get your feedback of what general strategies you want to make sure to see in the affordable housing plan. Councilwoman Turner, you listed several at my last meeting in March, and I'd love to hear other ideas or things that you feel are really important that we include, but I don't want to cut our down payment assistance program discussion off early. So are there remaining thoughts, questions, concerns, feelings about how the city could support a DPA program or home ownership?
Well, one thing I'm wondering is, as Sage mentioned, we just kind of entered into a partnership and agreed to fund an organization to do down payment assistance. Will this in any way affect what we've already agreed to do with or for them? Okay, thanks.
I don't think
See,
so.
Sasha shaking her head no. Yeah. What is the organization? I'm sorry that I'm not familiar with.
Mountain Housing.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know about this. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, great.
The only thing I would add is, I think Antoinette has talked about this before, and I don't feel the most informed on this, but apparently HACA does have a program for their renters to be accumulating wealth for down payments. Is that right? And then we're not really interacting in like how to deploy that or help them. So if there is a way, I'd love that. I just don't know how or what. And I think you had mentioned, Antoinette, that Councilwoman Mosley, that it was done in Charlotte, but maybe that could be incorporated into this overall modeling and planning.
Well, actually, so it's really the same voucher payment that's used for home ownership. And actually, the land trust, I know at least their first person who received a home, and she actually works at the Housing Authority now, she was able to get her home while utilizing her voucher. I suspect Sasha may know more about it.
That I get, but was there some kind of down payment assistance building as they remain tenants for years?
So
Or did I misunderstand?
Oh, and there's a family self-sufficiency program, and they are able to, over a period of time, save, and then with that money that's saved, that has gone into their escrow, that can be used for their down payment.
That, yeah, that. How do we touch that and help that?
Great.
I think that's a housing authority conversation between staff and the housing authority.
Yeah, sometimes, even when we talk about like, even these cottage cluster lots and flag lots and legacy neighborhoods and stuff, I worry that we will deploy policy targeting folks that we really want to help, but they won't be ready. And this is kind of speaking to it. Like if there is a housing authority program in place that we could be also lifting, are we ready? Are they ready? All this readiness in general.
I'll just share that Alex had some previous experience. So Alex, do you have anything just to contribute for awareness?
I do. So the program to which you're all referring to is with the FSS program, there is an escrow component wherein folks who enter into that FSS program, which I'll be honest, is not a requirement of home ownership. It's highly recommended and a lot of people utilize it. But the point of the escrow program is that as individuals enter into it and their rent increases, let's say somebody starts at $50 minimum rent and through participation with FSS, they receive new employment, they get a better job, they get a raise. Over the course of those years, those increases in rent are matched by the housing authority and deposited into an escrow account, which once the individual graduates from the FSS program is paid out to them directly. Now, not everybody in FSS is also in homeownership. As I said, not everyone in homeownership is in FSS. A lot of folks do double up, and a lot of folks do use their escrow in order to utilize that as a down payment. However, it is not formally a down payment assistance program, and I managed the homeownership caseload while I was with HACA, and I will say that there was regularly a gap in that a number of people who enter into the homeownership program not necessarily utilizing FSS because maybe they had other savings or they had other assistance of some kind, or even just they were farther along in the process, they started from a better place, they didn't necessarily have access to those large escrow balances. It's not that it doesn't exist or isn't useful. It's that it's a program that was not exclusively designed as a homeownership DPA.
Thank you, Alex.
My pleasure.
I think this brings up or emphasizes one of the most encouraging things that I've witnessed working in Asheville is that what is within the city's ability and its partners to impact affordable housing, there's so much energy and existing programs out there already. It's just a matter of bringing everyone to the table and aligning all of our resources, because it's wonderful to know that HACA has that program. It's just, again, a matter of like, how do we stack it? How do we leverage existing things going on? Because the city can only do so much to impact the housing market, because the housing market is its own unwieldy beast, but the city's doing a lot, partners are doing a lot, and it's just a matter of how do we figure out how to get everyone at the table at the same time. So just wanted to say that. Anything else about down payment assistance?
Just that, and this isn't down payment so much as it is like follow-up assistance. Like if we're talking about these legacy neighborhoods and potentially flag lots and stuff, the ideal in this situation would be that, say, someone that lives in a legacy neighborhood and is eligible for this parceled off flag lot could then build back there and have either host another family or rent it for additional income to help cover their costs of the main home. But we have historically not had a tool for that, like really nationwide, not just us, because there's not a financing mechanism for ADUs unless you have cash or significant equity. But I wonder if there is some kind of play in this realm of down payment assistance of helping some of these legacy neighborhoods take that step, which isn't really down payment as much as it is developer step or something. I don't know what you call it, but go ahead, Antoinette.
Except I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that the legacy neighborhoods have come forward and expressed a non-interest.
Right, which I'm trying to formulate a way that they might be interested if it could help them, because I agree with the legacy neighborhoods are not ready.
Let's go ahead and talk about that. These, because I've attended several of their neighborhood meetings, and they're aware of how it could help them. And they're making an educated decision that it would be in their best interest to not have them.
That's what I'm hearing. And I'm supportive of that. I'm just wondering in these longer terms, like scenarios, and how we get to helping folks achieve more generational wealth and equity in building and maintain their neighborhoods, if we're missing a tool here. It'd have to be hyper creative. But if, before you couldn't finance the ADUs, like I said, without equity or cash. But if we're now developing a potential land use that allows you to flag it off or have a separate parcel in the back, there may be some leniency there. But it'd have to be paired with a program that helped that neighborhood, not just any old person could come in and buy the lot. That's not the point. But maybe not the best time for this conversation. It's just something to think about. Because that isn't necessarily down payment on your first home, but it's maybe down payment on increasing the parcel equity and wealth. Okay, looking at time, there's no other additions to this slide. It looks like we have a few others on strategies, goals.
We can whip through these really fast. Katie, if you wouldn't mind just going to the goals slide. A little farther. There we go. Okay. So these are the 5 primary goals that we have for the affordable housing plan: promoting policies and resources that help existing residents stay and thrive in Asheville, preserving existing affordable housing and improving housing quality, increasing the supply of housing that meets the diverse needs of current and future residents, aligning place-based or geographically targeted policy and programs with related city initiatives, and perhaps most importantly, broadening and strengthening the affordable housing ecosystem and the city's tools. So is there anything, I just want, this won't be like the only opportunity for you to reach out to me. You all have my email and phone number, but I would just love to hear, are there any particular strategies or ideas that you're really excited about that you just want to really make sure I'm aware of and are a part of the affordable housing plan that might fit under one of these 5 buckets? You can also, of course, think about it and get back to me, but wanted to present this opportunity to do so.
Councilwoman, anything coming to mind? Jerry, I know we've had some other conversations where I just rattled off things, so hopefully you still have that list.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Great.
Well, all right. Then, Katie, if you wouldn't mind going to the last slide, I can just recap with our key takeaways. So again, today's objectives, we focused on Luigi and the down payment assistance program. I'm so happy that it never veered into a either or, because they really are 2 completely different and separate tools with separate goals and separate parties involved. We discussed what the goals of the city are for those particular policies and the merits of those particular scenarios that we discussed. We're gonna maybe talk about missing strategies another time. As I presented, Luigi has funded 22% of city subsidized properties by volume, but of course there's the equitable impact concerns around it. There's been a strong desire among residents to have some kind of down payment assistance or see the city support home ownership, and there appears to be political will and interest to do so. And I'll be returning for a full city council work session on June 25th.
Oh, you're at the work session. That's wonderful. I didn't catch that. That's great. Broadly talking around the WEAG, something that would help me as we go forward in, navigating how to change it or update it is understanding the decades-long calendar. So we're saying in some of the first slides, there's 2,300 affordable units created by our programs, but I'm having a hard time thinking or realizing how much are we not receiving in revenue per year from the WEAG? Like how much have we deferred for these 20 years? But also, when does it come back on? Like in 15 years, are we going to see $4 million in new revenue? I don't know if that's right, but where do those timelines fall? And I think even across the board, like when our bonds come back, like I'm trying to get the 30-year picture going. And do we need to be doing LUIG and HTF as hard and fast as we can for 10 years because then it'll start to recycle? Or do we need to do bonds for 15 years and complete cycles and then they'll start to, reproduce themselves? I'm trying to, do you know what I'm saying? Like that longer spread of time. That would be such a helpful thing to have in our plan, understanding, what we've done so far and when those revenues return and when they might be used again and how important it is to not say renew them at that time or the interest and all those things. I'm trying to build the whole picture. If there's any way to aggregate that, it would be so helpful to my brain when we're, revising these policies.
Great. Okay.
We could be building quite a pipeline. In 20 years, we may have $5 million more dollars that we aren't aware of, right?
Right.
And to Councilman Mosley's point, what are we also giving away that could be in our annual budget?
Yeah.
That's all for me. Councilwoman, any thoughts or things to share with Jara? So glad you'll be at our work session. Okay, then for those of you listening at home, we are concluding item number 2 on the agenda. We have one more item today, which is public comment. Katie, do we have anyone on the line?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have a couple. Just one moment, please. Caller ending in 5702. Your line is now open and you have 3 minutes to speak. Caller ending in 5702. Can you hear us?
Hello?
Hi, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Hello, this is Andy Barnett, the chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. I just want to thank all of you for your time this morning, and I hope you were as excited by Jared's presentation as we are. I came to you in February with AHAC's policy recommendations. And at that time, I said this whole suite of housing-related studies that we've done, including now the affordable housing plan that's starting to come together, really are creating an unprecedented level of clarity for us about what we need to do as a community. And I think you saw some of that today. I was really excited to hear all of the creative ideas that the council members have shared as we went through this. This is, really the important work is kind of getting down into the minutia around decisions. I want to remind you, though, of one other thing that I pointed out in our February AHAC recommendations, and that is the need to anticipate the funding and other resources that are going to be needed to implement the affordable housing plan. You've come up with a laundry list of great ideas this morning. Home repair programs that focus on higher incomes, or home improvement loans that partner with EPA, ways to expand special purpose credit for home ownership, better coordination with the housing authority. All of these things are tremendously important, and there's another list of many, many items in all of these plans. Most of these things don't fit within the funding guidelines for our current city solutions, Housing Trust Fund, Luigi, all the things that Jared shared earlier in the meeting, nor are they specifically bond funding. Our housing resources are really geared toward the production of new affordable housing, and they're not geared toward housing stability or preparation or the administration that's required to deliver new solutions. And so I just really encourage you to think about ways to prioritize the kind of creativity that you've demonstrated this morning, and the new ideas that are coming out of all of these studies that we have funded, so that we have, we're prepared to implement bond funds and implement our existing programs well. And part of that is staffing. We've talked a lot about the need for enforcement, and we've talked about I think Jared said, there's so much activity that's going on, and how do we leverage partners, and how do we layer all of these different things that are available so that we can really achieve the outcomes that we're looking for. That really comes back to just having the staff capacity to address, I think the word that was used earlier in the meeting was the minutia. We're getting down into the minutia of delivering these programs, and that's just time and attention.
Caller, that's been 3 minutes.
Sorry, Andy, thank you. We had to give up the time, but if you want to follow up by email, that's also welcome. Katie, did you have a second? Thank you.
Yes, we do. Caller ending in 7069. Sorry about that. Sorry, caller ending in 7069. Your line is now open and you have 3 minutes. Caller ending in 7069. Your line is now open. One moment, it looks like they left the queue. Now they're joining. It's loading. 1 second.
Katie, that line looks muted. You may have to unmute that line. It looks muted from my perspective.
Okay, 1 moment. Caller ending in 7069. Your line is now open. Can you hear us? Let me see. Let me reload public input. 1 moment. Seems they're having technical difficulties. 1 moment. Sorry, Jared.
It's okay. Let's give them a minute, see if we can get their comment.
Caller ending in 7069, can you hear us? I'm not sure why we're not being able to hear it on this end.
Okay, hopefully they are still listening, and we're having an unfortunate technical problem. If you are the one trying to make the comment, if you could possibly email it to us. I hate to do that, but I don't know that we're going to be able to fix this on the fly. And we'd love to hear your input, and we could certainly bring it up if it's relative to the next meeting if needed. But if you could email us all, that would be very helpful. No luck, Katie?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay. That's okay. For those of you listening at home, that was conclusion of our item number 3 on the agenda, which is our last item. Councilwomen or staff, any last thoughts or questions to share before we adjourn? Okay, well, good meeting. I appreciate everybody's input today, and Jara for being with us, and we'll see you at the work session. And if you have any questions from any of us, just reach out. And to the rest of you, have a great rest of your day. We are adjourned. Thank you.